Hello, and thank you for tuning in to FLAPtv Student Edition. Our guest panelists today are Anthony Ferrari, Joseph Catella III, and our regular panelist, Matthew Murphy. Thank you for being on the show today. We are a panelist short, so we have a new setup today. So, issue 1. Presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders has proposed expanding voting rights to people who are incarcerated, as he believes the right to vote is inherent to our democracy. Would you support enfranchising incarcerated people like the Boston Marathon bomber or convicted rapists? Anthony.
Yes.
Matt.
No.
Joe.
Yes.
Yes. So now, please say why. So Anthony, why do you say yes?
I think that they should be able to vote because the way I see it is, how can you expect prisoners to respect authority and respect laws if they cannot participate in the making of them?
I think when you have committed a crime and you have been incarcerated, you have violated your duties as a citizen, and so you should not have the complete privileges of a citizen. Now, when you are released from prison, when you've served your time and you're introduced back into society, absolutely they should have the right to vote. But while they're currently incarcerated, they have violated their end of the social contract and should not have the right to vote.
Joe, any response?
Yeah, so I believe that as prisoners, or as people in prison, our system tries to work on not just punishment, but rehabilitation. We need to focus on providing prisoners the skills to go through society after prison. And I feel like a great way to start is getting them involved in their civic duty to vote, and taking their votes out of the voting process could hurt not just the society. We already have a low voter turnout. We have like one of the worst, especially with how important voting is in a democracy. I think we had like 55% in 2016, and that's just uncalled for. That's terrible for something as important as a presidential election. And we're really losing the voices of prisoners. And in the question, you did put people like the Boston Marathon bomber, but you also need to look at it. There's also nonviolent drug prisoners in prison as well that are losing their vote because they were smoking weed, and I believe that is not okay.
And there's certainly some merit in the idea that we have prisons designed for rehabilitation, but that's not their only purpose, and no judicial body in this country has ever recognized that as their only purpose in this country. When you have committed a crime, regardless of whatever the crime is, you have violated your duties as a citizen, and I don't think you should have the full rights of a citizen in that situation. Obviously, you are protected from things such as cruel and unusual punishment, and your right to be alive and your right to have good conditions is still intact. But things like the right to vote, I don't think necessarily need to be intact for prisoners. If you have violated your end of the social contract, then the government is just to punish you, and that's just one facet of the punishment.
So I would disagree, and also 18 other countries would disagree, as well as multiple Supreme Courts of other countries, such as Canada, Britain. Both of these countries tried to get rid of voting rights for prisoners, but these Supreme Courts, I understand they're different countries, different Supreme Courts, but they understand that voting is crucial to a democracy and it's a human right, and this should be expanded among all citizens, even if they are in prison.
Yeah, I agree. The way that I see it is, we give them health care, we give them religious freedom. They can go to church, they can go to mosque, they can go to temple. They, some places probably still have a conjugation where they let their partners, wives or husbands, whatever, go to prison and they can, sleep in a room or whatever. We give them food, we give them TVs, we give them they used to give them cigarettes. Like, they have a lot of rights that are still met in there. They still, and with regards to cruel and punishment, we also, they're protected from abuse from the prison guard. So why is voting rights considered so much higher than those needs? Like healthcare is more of an important citizen right than
Voting is intrinsic to our democratic process. That's not a lie, but if you have in some way harmed your fellow citizens, especially, and remember that this proposal before us is a all or nothing deal. It does not exempt violent offenders. It does not exempt those who are criminally insane from voting in our democracy. And I understand the concern about nonviolent offenders in prison, but I think if you have committed a crime that has done harm to the society in some way, shape, or form, that you should not have the right to meaningfully engage with society as a whole. And that is at its core what voting is. It is your way of meaningfully engaging not only with your other citizens, but your elected officials. And I think if you cannot be expected to uphold the civic trust that has been placed in you as a citizen, you shouldn't have the right to vote.
Well, if we look at, we're political science students. We've learned that there's a huge scientific correlation between voting and economics, between voting and being middle class, and between education and voting. Usually the more educated tend to vote more than the less educated. Usually the middle class and the upper class tend to vote more than the lower class. So wouldn't it be more of a magnet to bring them towards those levels of society from lower class, because most prisoners tend to be of the lower class, bring them towards the middle class thinking, show them that they can participate in society, you know, so that then when they go out, they're like, look, oh, I can make a change. Maybe they find out that they like politics. Maybe they find a passion in something except going out, you know, instead of going out and stealing cars or raping people.
But your argument almost implies that if you vote, you will be highly educated, you will be in the middle class. People don't become middle class or highly educated because they vote. These people vote because they are middle class, because they are highly educated. You're almost implying that one causes the other in a way that just isn't true. And while it is true that prisoners may find an engagement in politics, they're still cut off from the bulk of political activity. Even if you were to give them the right to vote, they can't go out and volunteer for a campaign, they can't become an organizer or an activist or do anything like that. All they can do is simply cast a mail-in ballot. Many of them will never meet the candidate. They'll have limited access to the candidate's resources. When you're in prison, you don't have the right to just go on Twitter or Facebook and learn more about a political candidate. Your rights to that type of information is restricted. And so you're going to be producing voters who aren't necessarily connected to the political system as a whole. I don't think these people are going to find a passion for politics in the way that you're trying to describe. And again, I have to just clarify, once somebody is removed from the prison system, they should absolutely be returned their right to vote, because it is just that intrinsic to our democracy. But when you're currently incarcerated, I don't think you should have that privilege or that right.
So I agree that, you know, education comes before the voting. Voting doesn't cause the education. That is true. And they may not have the correct resources in prison to make an informed decision when it comes to voting. But overall, if you look at the bigger picture, there can be more good than harm done by making them feel that they can participate, that they are important, that their ideas are important. Yeah, they may not have the resources, but at the end of the day, is social media and those other sources a form of good information on politics? There's a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of people don't even educate themselves when it comes to politics. They just vote out of passions. They're like, oh, you know, I'm a Republican, and just because I'm a Republican, I'm going to vote for this Republican. I'm a Democrat, just because I'm a Democrat, I'm going to vote for this Democrat. They don't look at the statistics and the facts. Most people don't do that. Mm-hmm. That's why there's a big problem in politics. So it's not like there's going to be a huge difference when it comes to prisoners.
I would also like to, I kind of disagree with that last statement, because so there's actually 2 states right now that allow prisoners to vote, and it's Vermont and Maine, and they actually bring in people to teach the prisoners and educate them about the policies, about the candidates, so they can make an educated vote. And it's also, it really helps. They're probably more educated than some voters that are free right now and are making decisions just based off, like you said, Republican, I'm a Republican, I'm voting for the Republican. They have people coming into the prisons teaching them, and that is a source of educating voters, as well as bringing an interest to voting to the prisoners. And I think that education is a huge
You're
part.
going to create a bureaucratic nightmare if you try and introduce educating
Well, no,
prisoners
it's
on
happening
specifically
now, though.
voting. It's happening now in 2 small states with smaller prisoner populations.
Well, as well as other countries. Like I said, there's 18 other countries, including Canada, that have already expanded the right of voting.
And do they have people who go and teach and educate prisoners on
different.
politics and political candidates specifically? I think you're going to run into a political concern there where you'll have concerns of bias and concerns of, stacking the deck in one person's favor.
Well, there's multiple ways of doing it. You could get a representative for each candidate or whatever. But I'm just saying there are ways to educate the voters. They're not just going to be uneducated voter, like your main point was that they're going to be uneducated prisoners voting. So I thought that was...
Quick question, Matt. Would you support this bill if it was not all or nothing, if there was a difference between, the Boston Marathon bomber or... then
I would certainly be more open to supporting it if it was not an all or nothing deal. If there was a division in terms of the level of crime that has been committed, because we already have that within our prisons. We have prisons that are designed for people who have committed the worst of the worst crimes, things like the Boston Marathon bomber, things like mass murderers, things like that sort of issue. But we have also prisoners who are in there, like Joe said earlier, for things such as smoking a joint or even people who are in prison currently for things like heroin and cocaine possession. I don't think, as long as you're not a violent offender, that you should have as strict a punishment. But as it stands now, I can't support this all or nothing proposal.
Issue 2. Presidential candidate Senator Cory Booker has introduced a bill to the U.S. Senate that will study the possibility of reparations for descendants of slaves to combat racism and white supremacy. Critics of this bill believe that this policy would cost trillions of dollars without actually solving the issue of racism. Do you support this bill, and is the U.S. still in need of a slavery reparations fund? Matt.
I am 100% in favor of reparations. I don't believe that they should be specifically for the purpose of combating racism and white supremacy, but I think reparations are a moral necessity.
Joe.
I would say no.
Anthony.
Also no.
Also no.
And I'm alone again. So,
You're the only one today.
I don't think reparations for slavery specifically are the problem. If systematic racism and systematic discrimination in this country ended when the 13th Amendment was passed and slavery came to an end, then maybe we'd have a different story. But the fact of the matter is that we've dealt with issues such as Jim Crow laws, segregation, separate but unequal schooling, and especially up here in the north, we've dealt with issues like redlining that have led to minority communities being some of the most impoverished and worst off in this country. And that is a direct result of government refusal to act. It's a direct result of government laws that were passed designed to keep these people down. And reparations provide a rare and unique chance to provide a direct cash infusion to some of our poorest communities within the country.
Now, wouldn't you agree that we already have some sort of reparation programs, just like affirmative action or stuff like that, where we actually help people who are of color, who are in need? Do you think this is actually like a need for the U.S.?
I think affirmative action isn't really a reparation, and I don't think any court in law in this country recognizes it as a reparation. It's designed to combat existing and current problems within our racial system. Reparations are inherently designed to combat the problems that we did not address in the late 1800s, in the early 1900s, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. We've ignored the damage that we have done to these communities through government action and government inaction on certain issues.
Joe, any response?
Yeah, so I agree with the part that at least your introduction to your point of that we still have, there was racism, Jim Crow law, it didn't end after the 13th or even 14th Amendment. But I just don't think at this point in time that reparations make the most sense. Maybe if it was directly after the Civil War, after the 13th Amendment, yes, that would have made sense. But this is going off multiple generations now. And I'm not saying that slavery or Jim Crow law hasn't affected the generation that we have now. But I'm saying at this point, there's better ways to fix the inequality in black communities, or just like the inequality in black communities. And I believe Bernie Sanders was one of the people who came out not supporting reparations for slavery. And I think he actually has the best platform to help the black community with investing in black communities by a jobs guarantee. He wants to invest in public education. He wants to invest in higher education, free college. He wants to give he wants to give Medicare for all. The list goes on.
Let's talk about higher education for a second.
Yeah.
My town, which has historically been a majority white town, but has recently begun to change, has one of the best school districts in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Okay. And what you see across this state and across this country is that the best of the best school districts tend to be majority white communities. And that's a direct result of policies like redlining, where African American families were denied the right to live in certain areas on the basis of their race, whether it was officially because of race or the banks and the government invented another reason for it. We're still dealing with the economic impacts of that policy that's been in place and has been in effect as recently as the 1990s, the 1980s. I think that's more the issue here, rather than talking about, oh, slavery ended 100 years ago. I think we need to talk about the fact that our government has let down a vast majority, not a vast majority, but a very large swath of our population by not taking action to address this, by not taking action to try and fix this. The US government let this happen for years. And so when you want to talk about expanding higher education, the issue starts far earlier than that. It starts the moment these people are born into these communities, because by the virtue of being born in a worse off community, they're not going to have access to the same resources that I had. I had access to free SAT prep. I had access to all this other stuff that really groomed me to pursue a career in higher education, not a career in higher education, but really groomed me to pursue higher education. And poorer communities tend to not have these sort of issues, and because of policies like redlining, poorer communities tend to be majority minority.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Matt is saying. In regards to redlining, it's a huge issue because it's the redlining. It's not. It's like he said. It's not just slavery. You know, you had prison policies passed and sentencing regarding drug possession. You had the redlining where they said you can only live in one part of the banks wouldn't give loans to African Americans because they didn't want them to live in the white neighborhoods, and usually they would let them only rent in the inner city. So there was a lot of problems. There's even more, you know, Jim Crow, segregation, and police brutality. There's so many problems. But the problem here is the financial aspect of it. You can't fix, I don't think there should be financial reparations. I think there needs to be psychological reparations, because I think that there's there's psychological trauma in the black community with so many things that they've gone through, you know? And we need to show them as a society that their lives matter. We need to show them as a society that they're important just like everybody else. You know, there's problems in regarding the media and their portrayal of African Americans. There's so many issues regarding that. And when we, fix that psychological aspect and we say, we show them that they actually do matter just like everyone else, then the economic stuff will fall in place. Then they'll say, look, I can do this. I can be a president. I can do so many things. That's more important than just throwing money at them, because I feel like it's kind of an insult actually to just say, here, I'm going to give you money and this is going to fix all your problems.
My issue is, how do you have a psychological reparation? Is it just a government saying, oh, we're sorry, we treated you like absolute dirt for the majority of our country's existence?
This is not something that the government would, this is as a society what we need to do. But this wouldn't be a governmental policy. It's something that as a society we need to get together and say, the media, the movie directors, the music producers.
So vague, and you can't really force society to get together in the way you're describing.
But that would be the real way of fixing the issue instead of a financial aspect. The financial aspect would fix the fact that home ownership, economic aspects like that, like you said, tuition, the access to school, that would be fixed through the financial reparations. I agree. But the core problem, the real problem, the harm that's been done to them wasn't. If the real problem wasn't mostly financial, it was actually psychological.
And I've said this before, but I don't think reparations should be targeted at fixing the morality or the psychological damage that slavery did or that redlining and segregation did. I think it should be targeted at fixing the financial aspects. I don't think reparations proposals should try to combat racism or white supremacy. They should be designed to combat the real economic injustice that has been done to millions within our country and to many communities that still exist today and still deal with these problems today. It's not just saying, oh, we're sorry for what happened and that, oh, your communities can achieve, when we have systemic barriers to that achievement within our country.
See, I understand the point. You're making the point of more of an economic reason for it, not just for the
And I think
slavery.
that's the right argument to make on this.
If I did support it, that would be the argument I would be making. But the problem is I don't see throwing trillions of dollars just into the black communities. That's not going to help, because that's only going to be like, it's putting kind of like a Band-Aid on a main problem. Yes, you can give them money, but are they going to have health care? Like you said, the education, that's not going to fix the education problem. That's not going to get them a minimum living wage. That's not going to, like, there's so many other reasons.
And you're right on everything. That's not the be-all, end-all of the problems that exist, but it's a good first step in addressing the problems that currently exist. Because even if you implement universal health care, even if you implement universal higher education, these communities are still going to be worse off than their white counterparts.
Wait, Matt, do you believe that the people who came from a background of slavery should have reparations? But like, what about Latinos or Hispanics who are also in this community?
I think every community in this country that has evidence of systematic injustice towards them on a part of government action or inaction is entitled to some form of financial reparations. And we even did this with the Japanese Americans who were interned by the FDR's administration. We've recognized that reparations are not the be-all, end-all of systemic racism, but are a good way to address past government wrongs to a particular community.
Do you support a bill that deals with reparations, or this in particular?
I think at the core, I don't think I would support this particular bill, only because I don't agree that reparations should be designed to combat racism or white supremacy in the country. But I think they should be designed to combat the real economic injustices that were done to minority communities in this country.
Yeah, I think one thing that a problem with this, and it also relates to the prison voting, actually, if you think about it, is the specifics. Like, you know, it's the subjectivity. Like, okay, well, which prisoners can vote? Is it the nonviolent offenders or the Boston Marathon bomber? And with this, it's like, okay, well, if we do implement financial reparations, like, where's the money going to go? How is it going to be distributed? How much money is it going to be?
Yes.
Who's going to be taxed? How, you know what I mean?
The logistics are very complicated.
Exactly.
And that's a real concern that I, to be honest, don't really have an answer for. But I think it's something that the government needs to consider and the government needs to seriously look at for the first time in our history, because we've never really taken a serious step towards implementing reparations for these communities. And I think that's appalling, because we've done such damage to these communities through simply either not taking action or taking the wrong action.
Issue 3. Massachusetts has become the latest state to allow people to choose X as their gender on their driver's license and state ID. Do you support this move, and what are your thoughts on the trend of recognizing and accepting gender identities that may not necessarily match their biological gender? Joe.
I do support this bill.
Anthony.
No, I do not support it.
Matt.
I support this 100%.
All right, so now you're by yourself on this one.
All right. So I support transgender people to choose whatever gender they want to choose. But the way I see it is, you have to see it in benefits versus the risk. You know what I mean? So the benefit here, the main one, is for transgender people, where they can feel that they are the gender that they believe they are, right? Because, you know, there's people changing their passports, this and that, and then this license is going to be another step towards that. I don't know about the birth certificate, though. But the thing is, the risk would be safety, you know? Because couldn't somebody just pretend that they are transgender, and then if their birth certificate matches their real gender, but this one doesn't, how can the police track them? If they commit a crime and then they go get a license and say that they're X gender, but they're not, they're just pretending, because they're pretending to be transgender, wouldn't that create a risk of safety towards the law enforcement and towards the public?
No. I mean, changing your gender isn't going to change your fingerprint. It isn't going to change your DNA at its core. I think we should allow people to live their lives as they feel comfortable, and there isn't a significant cost or harm to allowing individuals to identify as transgender, as gender non-binary, or any of those categorizations, I guess, because I can't think of the right word right now. I think just let people live their lives, and I think the fact that we're taking action to stop people from living their lives as they feel comfortable is morally aghast.
Yeah, I agree with Matt. And I feel like this point I was going to make, but I feel like you understand more. You're just more worried about the law side of it, not the actual logistics of it. A lot of people get confused between sex and gender. Sex is your genitalia, what you were born with, but gender is what you identify as. And there are people that identify as non-binary, as you were saying, Matt, that are kind of in the middle of both of them. And it's hard. I would look more into this proposal to prepare for the show. And there was actually a constituent who they went to their congresswoman, and she brought this problem. She's like, yeah, I don't know what I identify as picking two broad categories, but she's in the middle. And this is gonna help the LGBT community. They feel more comfortable, feel more accepted in society. And as Matt said, why should the government tell them, no, just because you have to go in these two categories when they are going to feel a lot more comfortable as X or non-binary? I agree with Matt. I don't really understand the point of how it affects the law and safety, because there are other ways to solve that, and just let people live how they want to live. Like I said, the government shouldn't really have a say in that.
Yeah, but that's a slippery slope too, because then there's the license, and then there's going to be the passports, and then the birth certificates, and then other stuff. You know?
People, I don't think anybody seriously wants to change their birth certificate, because the birth certificate serves to identify who you were when you came into this world and serves to identify your citizenship. And as you grow older, you use your birth certificate for a variety of purposes, but really your focus on identifying who you are is things like your social security number, your license, your passport, like you mentioned. And allowing people to change their license and passport and make a minor change of what their gender is on those two things is not going to significantly lead to problems identifying people, especially when I don't think anybody's suggesting that they should change their social security number when an individual feels that they are transitioning into a new gender, or when they come out as identifying as gender non-binary.
Yeah, I just see it as the benefit is so small compared to the risk. That's how I see it. Because it's just the literally only benefit is if you are transgender, you get to have your preferred gender preference listed on there. Why should a law be passed just for something like that?
The benefit is letting people live their lives. The benefit is letting people be comfortable in their own skin. I think that's a massive benefit that you're kind of underselling. And it affects a rather small portion of our community, but I think the hallmark of a good government is how they protect their most vulnerable citizens. And I think doing something as small as this is not only just a symbolic gesture that shows good faith, but it's the first step towards recognizing that, like we talked about with reparations, our government at times has failed its least protected citizens. It has failed the most vulnerable people in this country. And I think taking symbolic gesture like this is a good way to show that we will not continue to allow the blatant discrimination that LGBT people have faced in this country.
I agree, and I also, to add on to the point, if this is something you just don't support, you don't have to select X gender, just select your gender that you identify as. It's really, I don't understand when people make a huge deal like, oh, there's going like 27 other genders they have to list. I know you weren't making that argument for the slippery slope, but even if they could just add on a passport, sex and gender maybe.
Okay, if that's an option, that's better.
These are some, yeah, because it's
you can't say at the same time that gender is not considered sex and then put it in the same place where you put sex on a license.
Right. We have less than 30 seconds left, so as a question, 20 candidates and counting so far for the presidential Democratic nomination. Who will be the first to drop out? Anthony.
I think it's going to be, her last name is Klobuchar?
Klobuchar?
Yeah, that one.
Matt.
It might be a bold pick, but I think Kirsten Gillibrand.
Joe.
There's just so many no names. Yeah, probably one of
So
those
many
two,
no names.
honestly. Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good day.